presentation. May I have a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Please, this item is at 3 minutes and keep it to budgetary purposes only. Thank you. Mr. Vinnie Frantantoni, please come to the podium, state your name, address, and affiliation.
Good evening, board members and the public. Is this on?
Yes.
First of all, I think you're wrong, Mr. Kubler. From my recollection, several decades ago, I don't think you could propose a timeline on budget as long as it's reasonable question. Public participation, when you have a mandated public hearing and you're asking legitimate questions, we've been through this before, and I'm complaining to the state, you can't set a timeline unless the person gets ridiculous. I'm going to proceed with that. I had a lot of questions. I just want to preface it with something. Mr. Topper, you said we're spending, according to your budget, $11,540 per pupil. Now, is it correct that we're spending $17,000 below adequacy levels? Is that a correct statement?
No, 17 million below adequacy. That's a state number, 17 million. Not per pupil, it's overall.
Overall,
Correct, 17.
Well, I asked your board members to look at Article 8 of our state constitution regarding education. The reason we got the income tax was we went to the Supreme Court ruled. Our constitution is very simple. I almost remember it by memory, it's stated so many times. It said the state legislature shall provide for thorough and efficient education for all New Jersey students aged 5 to 18 years old. That's almost word for word. When we got the income tax, the reason we got the income tax, because of that clause in the Constitution, and we were supposed to eliminate the local property tax. The state was going to pay for it entirely. In fact, what they did, the rebate started because they could not have both budgets. We don't collect the income tax until April 15th of the following year. So they set up this rebate program to tax us on both taxes, but then, when they got their budget, the state was going to pay for education, we're going to get a rebate for the previous year's local property tax. That never happened. I'm asking you board members to look at that constitutional clause and start the fight, like many of us good citizens have done over the years. Let's mandate that the state pay, according to the Constitution, what they're required to pay. Now, and the students on roll, I'll use budget right from the top. Students on roll, it shows minus 44 students. Was any of that drop in as a benefit of a new attendance officer?
I'm
Can
sorry.
you tell us what you're looking at, Mr. Frantantoni? I'm sorry. Which slide are you referring to? Which page?
Well, the advertised budget right on the front page, the first right on top of the budget, says pupils on roll, total 4691. Last year was 4735. That's minus 44 students.
The state does an enrollment projection. The numbers on the advertised budget were my individual assumptions. What I did was I simply took kindergarten up to first grade throughout the system and added 293 for an incoming kindergarten class, and those were my figures. The state uses a 3 to 5 year trend for their enrollment projection as they come out with the figures. I believe it was that Dr. Tomko explained. I just moved the class as they exist up one grade level. So there's different methodologies. And there's only a -6, because the total is for on roll, then you got to count the out-of-district students. So I have a -6 enrollment, including out-of-district students.
Well, we've had an increase in the private school enrollment by 31, but the question was any of this drop in enrollment and projected enrollments the result of the work of our attendance officers? How did you get students out of the school?
Domicile investigator. Next one.
The next wasn't in the budget, it only is the projected increase per household income. That's what it says. All right, now we've got the increase from local sources, $1,653,000, and I went through this whole budget. Did we get the 3.8, 3.7, $4 million loan from the state?
Yes.
Where in this budget, because I just find it, are we paying any of it back this year?
If it's not in the advertised budget, in the budget up front, which is referred to as the user-friendly budget, the amount of the state loan specifically for the repayment is under 11,000,230 XXX. That page is 4 of 17, and it's 416,000. It's 1/10 of the loan over a 10-year period.
So this year, we're paying back $416,000 in this year's budget.
In the 2015-16 budget, that will be $216,000 will have to be paid to the state over a 10-year period.
200 or 400?
416,000.
Why would we be in the advertised budget?
There's a lot more detail than is in the advertised budget.
And that'll be that fixed amount for 10 years. The 416,000.
Correct, unless Mr. Egan has any other comments. He's more familiar with that process than I am. Mr. Tomko answered some question, employee benefits and salaries to $49 million. We know that's what the school system is. He is administrators. The question I have with those are, why, and I hope we can come back, some of these positions over here we found out were unnecessary, some were political appointees, and I hope we can eradicate some of that that's been going on in the past. And in regards to that, in regards to the students per school, my sister talking about the school system, we had school number 2. Back then, 2 on Mill Street, and school 10, like now, with 9 and 10, have low enrollments. Mr. Arthur Pico was the principal of both schools. Now you have those 2 schools combined have 66 less students than the next lowest school enrollment. So, Mr. Pico, that might be a possibility. In the morning, he would go to one school, in the afternoon, because the duties are much less when you have that many pupils. The problems are much less when you have that fewer pupils and all that. So we may be able to save a principal salary on that. Now, facilities acquisition and construction services. You got $1,562,000. Are we planning to acquire any facilities and more construction services under that $1,500,000?
We know there's some projects already. We are dealing with Mr. Carter.
that's the principal payment for all the lease purchases.
For all the lease purchases?
Yes.
Well, on another section of, at the bottom of the budget, you have principal for lease purchase, $1,539,000. Is that the same figure?
Correct.
Well, it's not, it's $1,562,000 on that line, and on the back of the budget, it's $1,539,000. On the bottom of the budget, it says principal for lease purchases, $1,509,790. And on this line that I'm referring to, it shows $1,562,725.
I'm not sure what you're looking at, but the principal payments are $1,562,725.
Under the advertised budget, it says exact wording is facilities acquisition and construction services.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's the same figure, $1,562,725,000, sir.
That's not what you publish in the paper. Under the line item, facilities acquisition and construction services, for the total $1,562,000, and on the back, it says lease purchase, $1,539,000. In the paper, it's put there two different numbers.
I'd have to look at the document to be accurate.
And that's for paying what debt? Well, let me make it a little simple. Is that for the computers? The 3.3 million?
In general terms, it would be Pro Media, that everyone knows about, the 3.1. The Clarity lease purchase, several years ago, there was approximately $1 million for roofing projects, and it includes some miscellaneous ones for bus lease purchase, copiers, there were the computers that were bought, and some other maintenance vehicles. It's a combination. If you want more detail, I have it here, but it's a combination of 6 or 7 total lease purchases.
So the 3.3 million we borrowed for computers, I think, was that for 3 years or 5 years?
5.
Right. So a portion of that is in there?
Correct.
In that figure. And other charter schools, last year we paid $86,000 and $66,000. How many of our children were transferred out of here to charter schools?
It's on the enrollment data. There's about 8 students on a yearly basis. The way that the state gives us that number, each charter school fills out that they're sending to us, and we just have to verify they're a resident.
We know the number?
It varies. It's around 8 per year.
About
8, 10.
Now, under the per pupil cost calculation, you show over 3 years. In 2013-2014, for classroom salaries and benefits was $11,045, and it dropped over the last 2 years, and this year it's $6,700, almost $5,000 less. Why?
There are several factors, number of employees, number of students and how much was spent that year. I'm not going to make specific comments for past years because I'm not familiar with that data. But when you look at variances, it is fairly consistent.
With that,
Except for 13, 14, and I honestly do not know why, but well, the budget was overspent by $4.7 million that year, so that was a huge factor in that increase.
I asked the board members to look closely at that line item, find out why the 2013-2014 year was $5,000, almost $5,000 above all the other years. If you study that and find out the answers, maybe we can prevent some of the happenings that occurred, that dramatic cost increase to that amount. And it's all the way down the line. The salaries and benefits for administrators in the 2013-2014 was $1,939 per pupil, and all the other years it was only a little over $1,000. What are the reasons for that year? What happened in that year that it was such a dramatic increase, almost double of the other years? I think that's just two comments made according to Mr. Conco. He said, you know, it's only $15 a month. Not a big deal. He said that. I think your words are pretty good. I built a Formica box, when my kids were small. And the pennies and nickels and dimes, which quarters don't fit in there. I come home from work, I just put them in there. None of you up there, maybe you could, Mr. Tom, I doubt that, can lift that box there. Someday we're going to open and see how much is in there. So, you know, these pennies, you know, it's only pennies, it's only a few dollars a month, but it's cumulative, okay? We now have more Section 8 housing in this town than we've ever had before. Besides being a contract out of a laundromat, I can see these people, they can't afford their laundry. It's tough. Businesses are hurting. I had to lower my price to $1. Nobody else is going to washes for $1. Just to get customers come in, they can't afford it. So it takes $15 a month. You know, it's we haven't heard from the council yet. We haven't heard from the county yet, and it hurts. Like I said, it's cumulative. And the other thing with technology, we've heard. My wife was on the homeschool for 20 years. She refused. She was an officer of the homeschool, number 8. She led the fight against calculators in our school, like with our kids. There's no calculators, no computers, and no cable TV in our house until all my 3 kids graduated. We wanted this thing to work before the fingers on that typewriter with a memory. That's all a computer is. And so, I don't know where we're going. For 20, 25 years, we got the state-of-the-art technology. We're getting state-of-the-art technology. We're getting state-of-the-art technology. Our kids can't read. You weren't here, Mr. Conco, but before this board, I bought my Professional Builder, Remodeling Magazine, 3 magazines. The editorials in there, contractors, one of them, he could build 10 more houses a month. He can't get kids to read rulers. He can't get kids to do hands-on stuff. So all this technology is great, but they can't read. They can't read. Go out the street. Everybody's in the technology. You don't have to go to school. These kids in the worst urban areas, grammar school drop, they don't know how to use a computer, but they can't think. So, I mean, let's not put so much on technology. Let's start the kids. Nobody should get out of 3rd grade if they can't read. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Georgianne Polite, please come to the podium, state your name, address, and affiliation.
Georgianne Point, Stephen Street. Again, looking at the numbers for the students, pupil enrolled full-time and special ed, there's a decrease of 44 students as projected 2014 versus 2015, which is contrary to the state guidelines of an increase of 70 students. That's a big discrepancy. We also have 38 more students going out of district, whether it be for special ed or for private school placement, yet on page 4 of the advertised budget, you have a decrease in the transportation cost by $220,000. It doesn't jive. Can you explain that part of it? If you have more students going out of district, 38, according to page 1, but on page 4 of the advertised budget, you have a decrease in the transportation budgeted costs. Can you explain that to me, Mr. Jones?
We're looking at a lot more children attending the Essex vocational. And based upon some of the placements that I reviewed with Mr. Klein as far as special ed, there was more students attending the same location instead of having, for example, 30 schools, and a lot of schools had just one student attending the special ed area particularly. There's a lot more programs where instead of just one student attending that school, you'll be looking at increase of 4 or 5. So the way they're working in special ed is kind of, we're looking at a little more enrollment, but where the placements are and how they be bused will change.
Okay, so you have a difference of 7 students is going to make that overall, because the special ed students aren't going in the same direction as the other private school placements, correct?
You state that again?
You have an increase of only 7 students in the special ed area, whereas regular private school placements, there's an increase of 31 students. There's a total of 110 students.
That's special education also.
Okay, so then why would you have that number broken out? And it's included in private school placements. You have the special ed, an increase of 7 students to 29 students. Page 1 of the advertised.
Please state your question again.
Okay, well, let me summarize it in this manner. Are you saying that the total number that you're decreasing by, the $220,000 decrease in transportation, is going to be totally attributed to more students going in the same direction? That was your...
A large part of it, yes.
Okay, what's the other part?
The way we're looking to do class trips, the number of internal routes we do with our busing versus vendors.
Okay. If you look on page 7 of the advertised budget, you have a decrease in legal costs from 106. You have a decrease in the proposed budget. Is there more stability in that area of legal action that will be presented towards the board? We're expecting that to have been resolved, a lot of the issues.
Many issues are being resolved, yes.
Okay, but there's a decrease in that area though.
What's that?
there's a decrease in the costs in that area by half. I mean, I know our part-time attorney made over close to $600,000 over the past 4 years for a part-time job. Is that a lot of that, the decrease, because those costs are not attributed in that area?
If I may comment, as far as the legal bills are concerned, because I was involved in it, many of the outstanding lawsuits drove the prices up, and what's going to bring them back down is the fact that our law firm was successfully able to defend us, and a good portion of the legal fees now are going to be covered by insurance, which we were initially denied. So it's going to balance out, and it's going to come up with the net effect of a significant reduction in legal fees.
Now, on page 2 of the slide presentation, we are looking at school number 9 and school number 10. And the town itself is projecting apartment buildings being constructed, and rather than a decrease or such low enrollment that is proposed for 2015, wouldn't it be a little wiser to include an increase? And the second part of that question, at what point are these schools in danger of being closed for under-enrollment?
I don't think there's a danger of that, but I think, and I don't want to speak for the superintendent, however I will, the enrollment figures are what they are. Projected enrollments and which could affect the capacity of the schools based upon projects that are approved by the town council and properties are developed go down the road. Right now, though, that's down the road. The state is projecting an increase in enrollment totally in the district. I don't see the enrollment in these schools going down.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion to close public participation for section 1?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We now move on to item 5, resolutions for approval for the 2015-16 proposed school budget. Mr. Clark, please call for the vote.
The first on resolution 1, approve the budget. Need a motion for resolution number 1, please.
Second.
Mr. Zagari first, Mrs. Lamborn second. Motion's on the table. Mrs. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Mrs. Torres?
Yes.
Mr. Gallant? Yes. Mr. Zangari?
Yes.
Mrs. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mr. Kugler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
May I have a motion to move on to the second public participation?
So moved.
All in favor?
Second.
Mr. Frank Antoni, come to the podium, state your name and address for the affiliation.
Vincent Franklin, Mount Prospect here. I just want to address the 5 members who are on the previous board. Tongue in cheek, thank you for voting to deny us our right to vote on the budget by moving the school elections to November. And if rumors are correct, there's going to be Don't even try.
Thank you. Ms. Eileen Short, please come forward and state your name, please.
Good evening, Arlene. I'm sorry. Arlene Shore, 75 Rossmont Place. I'm glad to hear that our budget regarding our legal fees is within reasonable limits. And obviously, nothing, Counselor, has been directed or insinuation was personally against you, so we don't mean it that way. However, I know that there was an open which we received, and a question had been asked regarding the former attorney, which you can't comment on, but I can legally. And from 2009 to 2014, according to your open response, he was paid $594,815, considering the amount of time that was dedicated to this district and the financial disaster that occurred in this district, where council should have directed and guided this board. It's unfortunate that this expenditure of money was not directed towards the improvement of construction, but rather the disastrous occurrence that occurred here in the district. One of the things that I did note in the presentation is the state projection of an increase of 70 per district, which sounds like a tremendous impact. However, no one can project the distribution of that 70. And therefore, when you take the number of schools that we have, and when we start dividing it, that number does not have significant impact on the quality of instruction unless those 70 perhaps were divided specifically between 1 to 2 schools where we had capacity. When we do look at the average enrollment of schools in Belleville, on the average, and I know Dr. Tomko, you're well aware of it, and Mr. Egan, I know you're very familiar with the numbers. The general population of the schools is, in fact, not necessarily a high enrollment. In fact, the general enrollment is quite the norm for the state of New Jersey, except for our 2 schools. One that, for some reason, during this enrollment period, 115, I've noticed that that's a significant decrease in that figure. I thought that school was up to approximately 145 a few years ago. Is there any particular reason why we had an exodus that took us down to 115? Do you have any?
What I've been seeing is there are some programs that were put in different buildings that some of those students may be involved in. So.
I was well aware of some of the rumblings regarding that, and I am concerned that some of our students are perhaps relocated, and even because of their own uniqueness of a challenge of another language, or perhaps because of a learning challenge that might not require self-contained, but in effect could take not necessarily significant space for resource room, and yet we've displaced some of these students, and perhaps that's affecting these students. And I think that the students have a right to attend their neighborhood school unless those parents have raised the concern that we are not performing on standard and below standard, which then brings us to the next unfortunate subject, is that I believe the vast majority of our data, whether we like testing or not, indicates that we are projecting way below the standard. And in fact, as you know, through data, and in fact, Fortunately, our secondary school is almost near the bottom. So I do hope we get the Century 21 grant. And so I remember that our numbers last time were 78 points, and we're hoping to get more. But you know what? Then I took a good look at Century 21, and I looked at what the criteria for Century 21 is. And that criteria clearly states within your own agenda that you have to have an unusually large population of, quote, poverty-stricken, in effect, children who are performing way below the academic standard for the state of New Jersey so that we will get the grant. And I sure as hell hope for our students that we do. But board members, I'm going to say to you, look at the track record for the last few years. And was it the chicken or the egg? Because as we also look at this budget presentation, which by the way, is pretty good, except, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the low student performance level that lowered our real estate values of our homes and our assessments? So what brought this district down to the point that our beautiful little suburban village, that we are working to educate children who are faced with the horrendous dilemma of being poverty-stricken? And where are we giving them the chance to get out of poverty? Because right now, our academic track record, for whatever reason, is abominable. Which leads me to the fact that I did appreciate the tour of the library. And I invite all of you, if you take the chance to go to that library, and the custodians did do a wonderful job of giving us, and you gave us a huge space, bigger space than we've ever had. And take a look at what's on the shelf. And even look at how the students are able to access the stats. And my dear board members, on top of that, you dropped the library budget. We're dealing in this library, and in some schools we actually are at a point where we don't have them. And when I did say, why are the books? I'm not talking about Shakespeare. I'm not talking about things that really copyright is not significant. But when I saw copyright of 1970, and I hope I wasn't overcrossing my bounds, but I'm a resident and not a board member. But where the copyright is 1970, and I'm told, nowadays books don't matter as much. Yeah. Nowadays books don't matter as much. Is that why we have instructional books that are out of date? Thank goodness that we've put a few crimps in administrative expenditures. But our kids have been suffering for a long time because we don't have the basics and we don't have the books. I need to bring to your attention something that's possibly a rumor, but I would like to call it to your attention. There was an incident that seems to be going around town, and I think the board should always be aware of what's flying. You may have heard, you may not. No names are mentioned, but at the high school level, rumor has it that there was a student who passed out in the bathroom. I'm not asking for an answer. And during this emergency occurrence, the student was transported by a police car. So therefore, I'm not asking for an answer when I'm asking you to look at it. Was the nurse on duty during this occurrence? And if there was such an occurrence, that occurred in the high school. Why was a police car there rather than have the student transported in an ambulance? I'm not saying this is factual. I'm saying that this is what's going on through the town and the buses through the district. And I think it's better to let you know and let you check out the facts. I realize that some of it's very confidential, so I'm not asking you to cross the lines. But as a resident, I'm asking you to check into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cavallaro, please come up and state your name and address for the board.
I'm Morado, 98 Sanford Avenue. Just have a couple of things on this budget. It says pension costs. Can you give an explanation on that? It says does not include pension and social security paid by the state.
All administrators and teachers are in a pension fund called Teacher Pension and Annuity Fund. Those costs are not paid by the local district. They are paid directly by the state of New Jersey. And other employees such as custodians, secretaries, they're members of the Public Employee Retirement System. The employer share of Social Security and the employer annual contributions to their pension fund are paid out of the local budget. That's why they have that footnote.
Okay. Also, the federal and state funds and blended resource school-based budgets. Explanation for that.
Where were you again? Because I didn't hear you.
Page 7.
Are they advertised? The user-friendly budget? Where are you again?
Page 7.
I'm there.
It's double asterisk, second line. Federal and state funds in the blended resource school-based budgets.
I honestly don't know. State and federal funds are not part of the per pupil cost, but there are some options under No Child Left Behind to blend on school-based budgets. We do not do school-based budgets. It's more, I'd say, Newark or Jersey City, so it's something I've never dealt with in my career. That's an assumption. That's the best I can answer the question.
I don't want to sound rude, but we put this together. You didn't know that line was in there.
This is a state-produced document.
So you just wrote the numbers? This is a template for that was used maybe somewhere else?
No, this is used by every school district in the state of New Jersey.
And I'm not quite getting it. This is used by every other district, then why don't you understand the federal and state funds of money? If you're not understanding where that comes from in this, then your business administrator, which is in every district now.
I could do some research and answer your question, but I do not know it off the top of my head.
All right, I'll just jump on to the next. Is there anything new in this budget? Do we have anything new in this budget included? Check out.
New meeting.
Something that I'd like to propose and support and say, yeah, I want to vote for this budget because our kids put in this.
Well, yeah, well, tonight was voted on, yes, and now kind of the things that we're getting next month, and hopefully adoption of textbooks, as I mentioned, technology, different things like that, personnel issues, different, the CBE class, the industrial arts teacher, that program coming back, all those things I mentioned. That's all part of the budget, so.
So it's the industrial arts that basically is
Industrial arts, their academy program, rewriting curriculum, there's going to be someone in the summer. 385, which hasn't been here in a very long time, it's mathematics. Again, different personnel positions to offset some of the needs that we have throughout the district. Just some of the things on top of my head. Art and wine.
I want to speak that, I mean, you did a very, Mr. Compo, Mr. Paul, you did a great job on this presentation and putting these numbers together. It's very appreciated, I'm sure, by everyone that comes out and sees this year after year. But I do have a comment. 3 years ago, if you take that number, 3 years ago, and that budget had a $1 million surplus. That would mean, in just 3 years, we had a $5 million increase. If you add that surplus, that's $6 million. That's kind of sad. That's really sad when you think of our buildings, as you spoke about, our antiquated things that our kids are working with and the teachers have to deal with. I mean, since the state has taken over, I have seen no real cuts. So I'm going to ask you to review this budget one more time, and you start thinking about where you'd like to see our numbers increase, help our kids out here. I'll make a few suggestions. Came up with a couple of positions. We need to get rid of some positions, mainly our security guards. There's some other positions that need to be eliminated also. Leasing of buildings. There's other costs that can be taken out that we don't need. If we think what happened 3 years ago and go on a budget like that, just think what our kids can have. So I hope everyone, board members, consider and go through this budget and come up with cuts. Thank you.
Mr. Belleville, please come forward and state your address and affiliation.
Bill Billman, Clinton Street, Belleville. Just want to know if there's any other town in Essex County that has armed security guards elementary schools.
I really don't know.
According to Essex County superintendent, Belleville's the only one.
I would venture to
It's the only one. Who's doing the security consultant job now? That was just...
security consultant.
We had a security consultant last year, $7,500 a month. Just wondering.
Yeah, we don't have anyone else.
Oh, we actually never needed it then, so we couldn't say.
But I'm going to be asking the board to post for a registrar position that will include part of that school security piece.
Certainly in security, that's for sure. It seems like a reason why. Is the Board of Ed going to pursue trying to get money back from Clark?
Yes.
I understand it's $1.4 billion.
I believe that's on the...
And the state is supposedly giving us $4.1 billion. So why doesn't the Board of Ed sue for that?
I believe the board's contract is to go, specifies going to arbitration for a dispute. The clarity contract, and the clarity contract is only $1.4 million. So, I think that's the number that's an arbitration.
Okay.
Ms. George White, please come to the podium, state your name, address, and
George M. Polite, Stevens Street. Stated earlier, Dr. Tonko, that many of the CAFR issues are being addressed. We're going to have another audit, I presume, in June.
The audit usually doesn't happen a few months after that, but yes, it'll be the June 30th calendar.
By your estimates, as far as the way things are going now, how many of those items do you feel have been addressed sufficiently, that they're no longer an issue?
I don't know if Molly wants to answer that maybe, but I can give a percentage, but Steve, you want to answer that? No. So,
I believe it was at 67 or 68 items. I'm going to say there are 5 items that all relate to one area that hasn't been addressed, but I believe the remaining items, they've all been addressed. So I'm thinking at least 60 of the items will be addressed.
I also noticed in the advertised budget that we have salary for Richard Acosta. And I presume that's not as a principal, correct?
No, that's as the superintendent, and the state asks us, whoever was in that position of January 1st, 2015, for consistency of reporting that data throughout the entire state, that's the date, and Dr. Tomko started after that. Mr. Acosta was the acting superintendent at the time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that he was an interim superintendent, and at the time it was told to the public that he would not receive any compensation for that job, that he was only being paid as the principal.
Mr. Acosta, and I don't recall him out, Mr. Megan may be more clear, but he did hold the title of acting under the state. If you don't hold a permanent certificate and you're working under your provisional and you hold that position, you're only acting.
Okay, so he holds the certificate, and therefore he wasn't paid for that position, correct?
He was paid a stipend per month. I don't know what the amount was.
The contract was voted on resolution.
And both your contract, Mr. Clark, and Mr. Jacobus's contract end on June of this year? What is it projecting going forward?
They end June 30th of this year, that's correct.
Okay. And there's no projection going forward?
I defer to Dr. Tomko.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, seems like everyone else is in comparison, you know, for Title II jobs, there's a big discrepancy in the vacation days, but I believe that must be per contract. It seems like Mr. Clark has no vacation, no personal days. In any event, my last item is by request of some high school students. And I know quite a few students, and they came to me, and usually I ask them what's going on in their schools and try to find out what's going on. But today, a number of them said, can you ask the Board of Ed, what are they going to do about the rodent problem in the classrooms at the high school? There's an active rodent issue here in the high school.
Get on immediately more. It's a great pest management plan and something the plan should use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Jeff Manning, from the audience, the name address.
Jeff Madden, 256 Walnut. A couple of quick questions. First, surplus. I didn't get a chance to go through the budget completely, but we are reimbursing or rebuilding our surplus, and its facilities sounds kind of scary. 2 boilers ready to go. I see facade work on 7, looks costly. Various deferred maintenance, shall we say, prior budgets. So I would hope to see a healthy surplus there, because really not looking to get blindsided on top of the tax base that we're looking at here.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Zangari.
reduction of staff, we put in 500,000 before this next budget.
I'm sorry, use the microphone just for the benefit of everybody. It sounded great. Go ahead.
With the reduction of staff at the end of last school year, we put 500,000 back into surplus before this budget.
Oh, okay, all right. And that reduction in staff may have also been some people in the maintenance department as well, right? I understand we have people driving buses and so on and so forth.
We'll get to all that.
Yeah, and that brings me to another issue, re-enrollment over the summer. I can't say I was real happy with the policy with the $250 dollar turn-in reward. It seemed to have fostered a lot of fights amongst the students. And I understand there's still quite an issue in the lunchrooms where people are not feeling particularly safe. And there are a lot of fights have broken out, and my own kids tell me that, both vice principals are often in attendance, but still things get out of hand. And we certainly don't need to do anything to inflame that, but I think the mere advertisement of the fact that we're doing re-enrollment is a major motivator, shall we say, for people. We're facing the end of the school year now, and things are what they are. It's a good message to send out, and then follow through. And hopefully our domicile investigators and our attendance people, which I was told by Dr. Feldman in writing were attendance was being handled by the specific principals of every school, even though I heard from principals that students were showing up on their doorsteps to be enrolled in their schools. So I had, going backward, let's look forward, like we like to say. And I think that a close association with the town building codes, which has a CCO, continued certificate of occupancy, checking on the amount of people legally in a residence, so on and so forth, along with the Board of Health. Quality of life in Belleville is critical, and which brings me to the next point. We spend approximately a little under $13,000, I think, per student per year. Is that where we're at right now?
Yeah, it's projected a little 11 and a half somewhere.
Really, it's dropping. Okay. Just to point out, when you show Essex County and Belleville as it compares to Bloomfield being worse in terms of $17 million in underfunding, the state is famous for setting these arbitrary benchmarks, and yet they rarely take into account the stress level that a particular community of 53,000 per average income can handle. And so it's nice to put things on your doorstep like park that require $1 million or more in investment and not funded, which is illegal for now, I believe, legislatively illegal for them to do that to the towns. I think it should be illegal for them to do that to the districts as well. And when you have a bright idea from a bunch of bureaucrats, let them find the money for it before they, send it off to become the law of the land in municipalities the size and condition of ours. So I would hope we would follow through on that in re-enrollment. Is that okay? Very good. It sounds really great. The Power School portals for the teachers. Apple laptops. We're all looking for this technology to hit, and it sounds as though July 1st it's coming in. ProMedia might go out. We might be able, in the condition and ability, to handle things in-house, save a few more dollars. But most of all, having that technology reach the students and the teachers is just something that we're all on the edge. We're hanging 10 here. We're waiting for this to land, and we're really hopeful that this next school year is going to show that investment, and that's what we're hearing from you, correct?
Absolutely.
Can't wait. All right. So then the state loan has been realized, and it's costing us $416,000 for 10 years. Is that what I understand, Mr. Clark?
Correct.
And that money, those monies, I follow this stuff very closely, and I'm still very foggy about did that turn out to be $4.16 million? I understand it's interest-free?
Both statements are correct.
Okay, so the old number of 3.5, 3.7, whatever is now 4.16, and what is that exactly being applied to? Across the board for, could you?
Basically, how to pay off all the debts.
Okay, so for paying off all the prior debt, consolidating it into one loan. Okay, so that, thank you. 1.5, I think 6.2 million per year in lease purchases. That's inclusive to these lease loans. These are the maintenance payments of those various loans, the 2 million, the 1.2 for technology, the 4.16. Is that what I'm to understand?
Correct.
Thank you. A little clarification.
Just to clarify, within that 1.5 does not include the state loan repayment. That's in a different area of the budget.
The state loan of 4.16.
Correct.
So this is for all other prior loans and purchases and so on.
They're all lease purchases for prior years, correct?
That about covers it for me. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate your efforts, and I'm really excited about moving forward and looking to next year already. One thing, though, is we have to get the sixth graders out of the middle school. I don't think that the middle school will ever recover having that additional class in those schools. It was already stressed out and starting to show signs of recovery when it got a whole nother third dumped on it. And whatever we have to plan for going down the road, which I tend to think of School 4, an entire floor that's languishing, in a building that I know is more brick and steel and probably could withstand an earthquake better than many of the structures in town. That if we can look to a way to renovate that and bring that back online, make that school healthy, and seriously and truly get